turning off your technology on Sabbath is not about rejecting the technological age. It's about reclaiming some independence from it. And essentially what I feel like I'm doing is I'm mastering my technologies rather than allowing them to master me. And if I can't turn off my phone for a day, well, then am I a slave to my work, or am I actually in control of them? And after a while, a bit like a spiritual discipline, I've found that actually I really like being unplugged.
You are now listening to the Highlight Reel Builder for Authors, the Going North podcast. I'm your host, certified leadership trainer with the John Maxwell team, and best-selling author of the book, Stay the Course, Dom Brightman. And you're going to be getting some wonderful tips and techniques to advance yourself coming up next. Today's episode is sponsored by book number 2 from Dom Brightman, Stay the Course, The Elite Performer's 7 Secret Keys to Sustainable Success. It is the field guide to help unleash the elite performer that is inside of you. Cop it today on Amazon.com or heading over to dombrightman.com and snag it in book, ebook, and audiobook, so that way you can take it on the go and get yourself on the go to your northbound success. And today on the Highlight Reel Builder for Authors, known as GMP, the Great, Glorious, and Glamorous, it's the Going North podcast, and we got another super special, awesome human for you today, my friends. That's right, indeed, because today's guest, folks, not only is he a wonderful author, he's an award-winning author, folks. That's right, all the gold medals, baby. That's right, not only that, to put the icing on the cake, he's a father, husband, trainer, coach, keynote speaker, and the co-founder of Spacemaker's trademark. And that is a wonderful company. That is a productivity consulting group for busy leaders. That's right, folks, helping busy leaders become more productive indeed. So let's give it up for the DS himself. We're not talking about Nintendo, but we're talking about Daniel Sitt. How you doing today, Daniel?
I'm good, thank you, Dom. Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh yeah, man, definitely indeed. Definitely gotta have fellow brothers in Christ on the show. That's right, indeed. And no boats involved either. Well, not all the boats.
We're a long way from each other at the moment, probably the other side of the world. It's tomorrow where I am. It's at Monday where you are right now.
Oh yeah, that's right. The last remnants of TGIM.
I know. So I'm in Tuesday, so I can tell you what tomorrow's going to look like, which is good down here in Australia.
Sweet. That's right. In Tasmania, I'll show you, right?
Yeah, it's a long way away from pretty much everywhere. If you don't know where Tasmania is, it's an island right at the bottom of Australia, and sometimes people forget about where we are, even where we are. So next stop south is Antarctica. So it's nice to be talking to someone who's not a penguin for a change. No, it's good. It's good.
Sweet. That's what I'm talking about indeed, yeah. That's right. Hey, my man Daniel's on the ball already. He dropped a penguin reference, and I didn't have to drop one yet. This is good. Oh, man. But it ain't about penguins, it's about the delightful dance. And my goodness, man, am I filling in any cavities I may have missed about you, my man?
So I'm a father of 3, as you mentioned. I live in Tasmania. I've done lots of different things. I used to be a physiotherapist. I think you call them physical therapists in the States. And I did that for about 10 years. Then I moved into kind of working with training, and I did some church work and have worked as a pastor or a minister. And eventually I started my own business, helping people become more productive, because I just realized how important it was to think about how you work and why you work. And I just started to, I don't know, people's eyes lit up when I started to share some of the tricks and ways of seeing the world that I'd learned over time, and it's just been great. So I started with a course called Email Ninja, so how to get your inbox to 0 each day, and that was meant to be just a hobby course, in the sense of I did it for a bit of fun when I was working as a physio and in ministry, but it just grew and grew, and now we've got people all around the world using some of our inbox 0 techniques, and so I ended up in a productivity business. And then over a number of years, I ended up taking a lot of the experience I'd had coaching and training people, and wrote a book about how to be happier and healthier and more human and more productive by unplugging from technology and making space in the digital age, which is that book that you talked about that came out last year.
Woohoo! That's what I'm talking about indeed. That's what I'm talking about indeed. So a man of many interests. That's what I'm talking about indeed. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. So my goodness, what led you to go into physiology, man? Was that something that you always wanted to do at that point in time, or how did that work out?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I'm quite an intentional person. So I really like to think about why I do what I do, in lots of different areas of my life. But what's funny is, I was 16, 17 years old and I finished school and I got my grades and I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. And I remember literally going down the list of like different courses. So we call it university. I think you might call it college, but going through the university courses and trying to work out, what I could do with the grades or the scores that I got. And, I could be a lawyer and I didn't want to be a lawyer, and I could be a dentist, and my dad was a dentist and I didn't want to be a dentist. And the next kind of highest score was to be a physiotherapist and to treat people. We do, work with sports teams and work in hospitals and all that kind of stuff. And so I just did the course because it was on the chick. I was on the list, and I didn't actually give it a lot of thought about why I might do it. So I'm really grateful I learned how to work in the health field and to think scientifically and how to work with people who are in pain or struggling and help them shape their habits. So that's really what physiotherapy is about. But yeah, it became pretty obvious that it's not my passion or my heart, and which is why I'm not doing it now.
Yeah, it makes sense. Makes sense indeed. Heck, it probably even built you up for the skills you got now with helping folks becoming he-male ninjas. That's right. Sacred Samurai is a productivity man.
Yeah, look, it all helps. I mean, it's about listening to people, understanding problems and trying to solve those problems, uh, and helping people shift their habits. And then obviously with my background working in ministry, I obviously have a theological background as well. So it's given me the ability to think at a broad level and think spiritually about what's happening as well as scientifically. And I think all of that is what I express in my book, and trying to help people live differently and reclaim some space in their lives when they're so busy and frantic all the time.
Amen to that. Amen to that. I usually ask this later in the interview with this part, but hey, I'm probably gonna ask it now. So my goodness, since you have a background in ministry, I'm pretty sure there was some transformation that happened, man. So what led you to become a Christ follower, my man?
Ah, that's an interesting question. So my mum and dad weren't, they weren't religious people at all. In fact, there's not a lot of religion in Australia where I grow up. It's a bit different than some areas of the US, I think. But look, when I was a child, I think really I can just say that God found me. So I remember as a child, I was very nervous and anxious and quite afraid a lot of the time. And I remember just these random encounters where I'd be in my bedroom at night and an angel, I think I'd call it an angel, I mean, I didn't know at the time, would actually come into my room, and I saw this kind of like presence, and I actually felt this warmth whenever it happened, and I felt this sense of joy and love, maybe hope. It was like I had this kind of spiritual friend that would visit occasionally. And I don't know if I'd give a name that's the Holy Spirit or if it's an angel, but whatever it was, it started me asking questions about whether there's a God and who am I, and what does it look like to see the world through spiritual eyes and not just these kind of rational, scientific eyes that we have. I've had many stories that led to faith, but that was probably one of the things that started the journey, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm talking about indeed. And the beautiful thing about it is that the transition period was kind of an uphill one, if I'm not mistaken, because I believe you had played a card game at a camp or something, and folks are like, "Oh man, he's not fully transformed yet."
Yeah, I can't even remember. I don't know what podcast you've been listening to, but yeah, so I remember the first time. So I ended up getting baptized when I was about, I think about 13, but I didn't know, I knew almost nothing about faith. My mum actually became a Christian, and I decided, well, I wanted to do the same. And and I started praying, and I decided that I should read the Bible because I'm a Christian now. So I just read it like a normal book. But I'd never been to a church service. I'd never gone to a church community. And so it was quite a few years later where I said, hey, to my mum, if we're meant to be Christians, should we maybe go to a church for the first time? This is like a few years later, which is kind of the opposite of how most people come to faith. But I do remember going to a camp, like a Christian camp, pretty soon around that time. And, there was a lot of habits and behaviors that I had that just weren't the same as those around me. And so, yeah, as you said, I remember particularly I was playing a card game called Black Lady, where the aim is to not lose by getting too many points. And there's one card, the Queen of Spades, where if you get the card, you end up with 13 points and you're basically going to lose. And I accidentally got that card, and I let off the F-bomb very loudly, and everyone else in the room went silent, and I kind of realized, clearly Jesus people don't use the F-bomb when they get the Queen of Spades. So there's been lots of times in my life where I kind of, you learn what is culturally normal for Christians and what's not. But it's put me in a good situation because I kind of feel like I always bridge the gap between the kind of the church culture and what I see in the world around me. That's where I fit most comfortably, somewhere bridging in between. Sometimes I find church culture a bit kind of strange, and sometimes I find the world culture way too broken, and I kind of like to straddle somewhere between. Maybe it's a bit of a messenger between both. Yeah, and learning from both as well.
Oh yeah, definitely, because you could definitely learn from both. Because like I remember a couple of speakers I've heard in the past before. It'll be like, yeah, folks in the world, they know about scripture themselves and they use it and they achieve success, as opposed to spiritual people who may know scripture and they may not have the worldly success, and they may be in a more feeling like a time where they might want to use the F-bomb even though they probably want to use the faith bomb instead.
Yeah, I've stopped using the F-bomb generally. It tends to not work when you're a pastor, but so I've definitely changed my behaviors, but hopefully in response to knowing God's love rather than feeling like I have to do things to make me right. So yeah.
So my goodness, man, freaking amazing, like a transformational process. So now you're in this wonderful world where you get to help folks to be more productive, man. So my goodness, like I'm sure there's email. Like what do you think a lot of folks get wrong about productivity nowadays? Because that's a big thing that everybody wants to be. They want to be more productive. Like what do you think is some of the things that folks get wrong about being productive?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think partly working out what productivity is an important thing. Someone once said to me, what is productivity? And I was a bit stumped. I didn't have an answer, and I was like a productivity consultant. So it's kind of, you should know an answer. And what I would say is it's getting the right things done with the right intentions. So what it's not is just getting more and more done, or being, ticking lots of things off your list, or making sure you're always achieving things. I think it's more about, are you achieving the things that really matter? And are they being done with the right heart and the right spirituality, the right intention? And that takes a different way of looking at life. It requires a lot more contemplation, a lot more stillness, and a lot more of a sense of knowing who you are and why you're doing what you're doing. I remember David Allen once said that if your goal is to have a really restful holiday with your family, and you go on vacation and you end up doing lots of work and achieving lots of stuff in terms of tasks and emails, well, then actually it's been unproductive because you didn't achieve what it is that was meaningful. And if your task or your most important thing is to spend time with your children and just to muck around and be present and listen to them and just have a laugh together, but you're always thinking about Instagram and how many hearts you have on it. Do you know what I mean? Then you're not being productive. Do you know what I mean? So productivity is actually about knowing who you are, what your calling is in life, what you value, and what it might look like to shape your habits and your practices around those things. And that typically means rethinking our relationship with technology, which is why I wrote a book about it, because it's often technology that fills our life up with things that aren't necessarily meaningful. And what the result of that is that we're missing out on doing a lot of what actually matters, or what we would even say matters. Typically rest, typically relationships that are face to face and warm bodied and connected, typically time to explore the inner life, so silence and solitude, or time to pursue creative arts and pursuits like playing music or walking in the bush, or walking outdoors, or learning a language, doing the things that are harder than watching Netflix, but actually give us life and energy longer term. Yeah, so I suppose being productive is shaping your life around what really matters, and being intentional in that, which is why I love doing it. I love having these conversations with people.
That's what I'm talking about, indeed. That's what I'm talking about, indeed. And solid definition of productivity, because you're so right about that. It's like, vacation is going to be a vacation. And then you go and you bring your laptop. It's like, woo, I knocked out 1,200 emails, responded to like 30 people via phone call or text or whatever. Like, I'm freaking amazing. And then you come back, it's like, oh, vacation. I was supposed to do that. Oh, I guess mission failed.
Mm.
Yes, indeed, yes, indeed. So my goodness, and you mentioned something very important: the digital stuff that's going on around nowadays. Especially the fact that, like, I like to call the wonderful smartphone the zombie apocalypse device, because it's built to like suck up our attention and like suck it dry. So my goodness, man. So what helps you to really stay present and really, I guess, in a way, enjoy nature, actually enjoy life, not being sucked in by the zombie apocalypse?
Yeah, I like that term, the zombie apocalypse. Look, I think I mean, I'm an introvert, so, I do things in a particular way, but I do think all of us need a bit more time to think deeply and reflect contemplatively on what we want to do with life and where we're at. I was just listening to a podcast this morning, actually, with a lady who was saying that 25% of the energy of our body is used up on our brain, particularly the prefrontal cortex, the front of our brain that thinks deeply. But what happens is, if we don't rest, if we don't take time out from our devices to just give our brain the ability to think, well, then our limbic system, the emotional part of us, just acts constantly. And that's where people get stuck, because you get stuck if you don't think deeply. You get stuck in a job you hate. You get stuck in relationship patterns that are really damaging and destructive. You get stuck in addictive cycles. You get stuck, whether that be like digital addiction, like, games, or online stuff, or obviously physical addictions. And you just get stuck by living other people's lives, the script that culture says we should live, rather than, actually taking the brave steps and living the life that you're meant to live. And that happens because you don't create space in your life away from the churn and the busyness and the doing and the swiping and the notifications. Without that space, you can't really know who you are or where you're going, and there's a cost to that. So yeah, I'm really passionate about helping people turn off their phone a day a week, disconnect at the start of every day for like 10-15 minutes, so that they don't start and end with tech. Have digital free meals where they're connecting with people in their house, in their family, without a screen, and actually just having times where they meditate or pray or think, because your brain needs it to be able to know who you are and where you want to head. And running to stand still is not a great way of living, but many of us get caught in that cycle, and it's easy to do. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Them digital free meals, indeed. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. Because when you first said that, I'm like, oh, I was thinking, oh yeah, free meals, digital. Yeah, it goes in your head. But it was like, hey, wait a second. No, that's not what he's talking about. It's like good old family table dinner time. Just eating, chatting, being aware, being in each other's presence for real, and not having the tablet of doom in front of you, or the TV or whatever. Just being in the moment, man. So my goodness. And heck, even like dropping the phone and not using it a day. So do you do the same day every week for that, or is the same day every week that you don't use your smartphone?
Yeah, look, and I know that's a pretty radical idea. No technology, no phone for a day a week. People are going to be dropping the F-bomb right now when I said that, I reckon. But But in terms of what I do, yes, I call it my digital Sabbath. I call it the weekly day of rest in my book. And the conclusion I have is, for me, work is typing and swiping and using a screen and communicating online using the internet. I mean, this is my work. I'm speaking on podcasts, I'm training people in productivity, and I'm writing, which is on a screen. And so if that's my work, if my work is done through a screen, and if it's knowledge work, if it's like head work, which is what I'm paid to do, I'm not a physical laborer. I'm paid to think. Well, if that's the case, then what I found is I was still resting on the weekend, but I was typing and swiping and communicating online and using the internet. It's just using different apps. And like, the brain can't tell the difference between Outlook and Instagram. And I realized that actually the reason I wasn't deeply resting is because I wasn't not working. I was still working from a brain perspective. I was just looking at a different app or a different screen, but it was all work. And so for me, a digital Sabbath is not about rejecting technology. It's about mastering life without a screen. And I realize that there's a whole lot of beautiful things I can do in life that I've been neglecting by being online so much. And so I turn off my screen. Yeah, every Friday night at 6 o'clock, I turn off my screen, or when we eat dinner, and then I turn them back on. Saturday. Look, it's not like legalistic. Sometimes I'll check text messages in the middle of the day if I think something might come through. Sometimes I'll take my phone when I'm walking outside, just in case, like if I'm bushwalking, for safety, or and I'll watch TV, with my family if it's like family movie night, because that's a social thing, and I think that's a bit different than what I do for work. But it's about trying to broaden the neurological scorecard of my brain. Like, it's making sure I get to do some walking and reading and chainsawing and bushwalking and playing board games and sitting there being bored while I have a coffee and just reflect on my thoughts. None of that happens during the week very often or very easily. So yeah, I have a day off without my screen so I can live well, and we do that as a family.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Indeed, my man Dan's been dropping some jewels, y'all. Y'all better be getting a tennis bracelet of wisdom from this episode, y'all. I'm telling you. That's right, indeed. Man's got them gems for you, indeed, y'all. That's what I'm talking about, indeed. So, my goodness, bushwalking. So, we're just talking about like walking in the forest, or is it something special to mix, or is that just another Australian American
Yeah, I don't
language
know
clash?
what do you call it when you go walking in the forest? What do you call that?
Well, that's really that's what I call it, to be honest. I know some people like to say, "Oh yeah, forest bathing is where you're not only walking the forest, but you're like staying there for like hours and just soak in the trees." And it's like, okay, we get it. I
Yeah.
guess we get
Nah, look, so the bush in Australia, that's our forest. It's the
it. Okay.
eucalyptus trees, the gum trees, and the rivers and the lakes. We just call it all the bush. So we go bush, we walk in the bush. The British, the English, they go tramping in the countryside. So whatever you guys do over in America, when you leave the concrete jungle and you've got trees around you and you're walking and breathing fresh air, that's what I'm talking about.
Oh man. So I guess one of the trees in that bush is named George.
Yeah, I have a few bushes. Yeah.
That's right, indeed. All the good bush, indeed. So, my goodness, man. So, how was it like when you first practiced the digital Sabbath habit? Like, did you have withdrawal for the first few hours of those? Because I can imagine some people may be like that, where they don't realize how addicted they are to technology. So, how was that process for you when you first started adding that habit to your routine?
Yeah. So look, I didn't start as a habit. I started as kind of an experiment on myself. And I thought, actually, I'm feeling pretty wired, and I'm tired, and I'm constantly distracted. And I actually think my kind of constant use of the internet has a big part of that. It is part of that. And I wanted to, it was almost like a biofeedback experiment on myself. That's, biofeedback for a physiotherapist is where you would like, you would put a particular, machine on a muscle and see how it reacts. So I wanted to give myself some feedback. And so I disconnected from my devices for one day on a weekend. And I just wanted to see how I reacted. And it was really hard. It was like I kept wanting to find out what the weather was saying and wondered what the text messages were. And like, I'd go to the toilet and I'd go to reach my phone because like this terrible, disgusting habit of looking at, the news on the phone. And I realized I had all these terrible habits, which were just actually really not the way I wanted to live. And I found it hard. And so it made me think maybe I need to do this again. And so I did it the next week and I did it the next week. And eventually it's like, yeah, this is something that's really good for me. That I read a quote that said essentially that if a guy called it wasn't Walter Brigham, and it was a guy called Rabbi Abraham Heschel. And I'll paraphrase, but he basically said that turning off your technology on Sabbath is not about rejecting the technological age. It's about reclaiming some independence from it. And essentially what I feel like I'm doing is I'm mastering my technologies rather than allowing them to master me. And if I can't turn off my phone for a day, well, then am I a slave to my work? Am I a slave to my devices? Or am I actually in control of them? And after a while, a bit like a spiritual discipline, I've found that actually I really like being unplugged and I practice it more. And I still find it hard to turn off work because, I'm just so busy. But when I do, and I enter Sabbath, it's just fantastic. And it's like the best day of the week. And I'm like, oh, I get to turn off my phone and just relax and enjoy life and hang out around the house and have a day with no plans, and to just, read physical books and eat bacon and eggs and ice cream with my kids and pull out our board game cupboard and just play, like I just get to live life in a really different way once a week. And it's like a holiday every week. It's fantastic. And so I love it now, but it didn't start like that. It started kind of with the shakes and the shivers and feeling pretty addicted and wondering how I could get off that kind of high.
Oh, yeah, that's what I'm talking about indeed. That's what I'm talking about indeed. That's right indeed. Heck, that Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel quote, like, man, I got to put the link to his book, The Sabbath, in the show notes for this one, because that quote reminded me of that nice little pocket-sized book indeed. That could be a compliment if someone wants to go extra deep on the deep side of the game. In a good way, not the deep end, just the good deep, not the deep end.
Look, it's a fantastic book. It really is. I love that he says that all religions, including Christianity, have cathedrals or temples, or like we have spaces, physical spaces where we worship, and that's our expression of holiness. But he says that the Jewish people have cathedrals in time, and it's called the Sabbath. So they actually don't have a temple. I mean, they do have spaces, obviously, like the synagogue, but actually the most holy institution for the Jewish people, according to Heschel, is a day off a week, and it's a cathedral in time, and it's like a holy moment, a holy space, and you give God the first fruits of your time. So the Sabbath is the first day of the week for the Jewish people, not the last, and they begin with the day of rest, and they give God that and trust that he'll end up making the communities and their life work as a result of it. And there's obviously a whole lot of legalism and things that kind of were layered on top of the theological idea of Sabbath in the scriptures for the Jewish people. But the concept is beautiful, that as a community we rest, we work from a place of rest, we trust God with the first fruits of our time, and the Sabbath is a cathedral in time. And yeah, it's worth turning off your phone when you go to that cathedral.
That's right indeed. Hashtag Dan the Man, baby. That's what I'm talking about indeed. That cathedral in time indeed. My goodness. So since you've been on a bit of a podcast tour, and heck, you even had a podcast of your own back in the day, if I'm not mistaken, is there a question that you wish to be asked more often when you're on the guest side of the game on these podcasts?
Oh, that is a hard question. I've never thought of asking myself a question. Uh, hmm. Probably just why do I care about making space? I suppose that's why I speak to people. Uh, I really think it's important in this busy digital frantic age of overwork and constantly watching screens. I just think we're losing some of our humanity and some of the best of life. And I'm on screens like 10, 12 hours a day, like the average American. I've got a digital business. I love that I can work from home, and I wear UGG boots, and I can get paid training people in New York. I love that I can live in this small town called Hobart and actually have a global impact. So I'm really thankful for technology and all that it brings. But if you oversaturate your life with it, if you never unplug, if you don't create healthy patterns in your life where you live life unmediated, disconnected from your devices, I definitely think we lose something of what it means to be truly happy and human and healthy. And for me, that's about making space, just making space, not being rushed, breathing and relating and connecting both with each other and with God. And they're the moments that you remember at the end of your life. No one's going to say, gee, I wish I spent another 10 hours playing Minecraft, or, I wish I had more Zoom meetings, like I wish I'd spent that extra few months scrolling Instagram. Like it just doesn't happen. Like I wish I actually paid attention when my kids were young and they were on the beach and I was actually scrolling Instagram instead of watching them. I wish I actually had the ability to exercise more and enjoy the fresh air. I wish I slowed down more and enjoyed practicing the things I was thankful for. And I wish I prayed more. I wish I was more in community. I wish I ate with my friends and my church and my family more. It's all that stuff. And so let's make space for the things that matter.
Amen to that. That's right, indeed. And that's probably a pun intended. Spacemaker, baby.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Spacemaker, if that wonderful book of yours was a food, what would it be and why?
Well, it would be healthy. So I don't know, maybe Brussels sprouts, or maybe broccoli. So it's you need it. It makes you feel good after you've eaten it. It makes you feel healthy for a long time afterwards, and it's a lot easier to eat than chips and pies. But we like to avoid it unless we practice it. And at first, if you never eat vegetables, you don't like them. But if you keep practicing, then you come to crave it. There you are. That's what making space is like.
Well, there you go. Well, BSB, baby. That's right, indeed. The Brussels sprouts, broccoli, baby. That's right, indeed. My man chose both. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. I believe you're probably the second guest to mention Brussels sprouts for their book.
Yeah, I like them. They make you fart though, so I don't know if that counts. I think the analogy only goes so far. But hey, we'll take it as far as we can.
Well, there you have it, folks. This book is going to make you fart out unproductivity, y'all. That's right, indeed.
There's my new tagline, Dom. If I write a second book, that'll be my tagline: how to unfart unproductivity.
There you go. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Well, we're coming down to the magical question that every guest gets to receive, and that is if you were to wake up tomorrow, and I guess that'll be hump day in this case, and you were 25 again, but you're still in 2022 with all of your knowledge and experience, what advice would you give to yourself?
I reckon I would say live the life you've lived, actually, and live the choices you've chosen, but just trust that it's going to be a lot better than you think. So don't stress the whole way, which I'm really thankful for. I'm thankful that I wouldn't change too much from when I was in my mid-20s. I'm really grateful for the family I have, the wife I have, the church community, even the mistakes that I've made, and there's been lots of them. They've led to growth, and they haven't been destructive in that kind of long-term sense. They've wizened me up a bit and helped me to be a bit more humble, which I'm very grateful for. So I probably wouldn't change much, and I'm very thankful for that. But I would buy a whole heap of shares in Zoom, in Netflix, and Apple, because then I wouldn't have to work anymore.
Yeah, Apple's usually a safe bet.
Well, it would have been 30 years ago, 20 years ago.
Yeah. Well, for those who need to keep in contact with you and all the wonderful stuff that you're doing, what's the best way for folks to keep in touch with Dan the Man?
Yeah, so look, I'd love to hear from you or connect, I'm at spacemakers.com.au. The AU is for Australia. We run productivity training for teams online all around the world. And I've got a trainer in Canada for the time zone as well. So we help you get your inbox to zero with Email Ninja, help you organize your life using a list, using List Assassin. We have Priority Samurai to help you not just know what your priorities are, but work out how to activate them day by day. And of course, I've got a training about how to make space by unplugging as a team and create digital wellness based on my book. So any of that stuff's available. I'd love to connect, and feel free to look at my website and get a whole lot of free downloads and other things related to my book.
Woohoo! Well, there you have it, folks. That's right, indeed. You'll be a Japanese super warrior. That's right, a Japanese Australian super warrior. Oh, that's right, the list assassin. That's right, indeed. Who's also getting his email list to zero, indeed. And then you'll be a samurai. That's right, with all the Mushin swag, indeed. You'll have that clear mind from all the productivity you'll gain from Dan the Man, baby. That's right, indeed. And Space Makers. And you'll have that more space to make more stuff, maybe. Oh, man. But yes, indeed. Follow Dan the Man, indeed. So any parting words before we close up shop?
Live life well, live life intentionally, and maybe do one thing this week where you're unplugged and you're investing in a habit or a practice that gives you real life and real joy, something that you'll look back on when you're 80 and think, I'm glad I spent my time doing that. Yeah, go do it. Make some space.
How's it going, my friend? I'm so glad you made it to the end. That shows that you are an uncommon finisher, and I am so grateful for you sharing your ears, your attention, and your time to this wonderful podcast to do something that'll take yourself to the next level. And for everybody else involved in this wonderful program, share it with at least 3 people in your network so that way more folks can not only catch the fire that is on this podcast, but can also be inspired to be their best. Advance others to advance yourself.